that video, the end there, it reminds us that we don't have to live in fear. And that's what we're looking at in this Lenten season. It is officially Lent. And we begin a journey today. Together we will journey toward living unafraid, living with courage and finding hope in times that seem pretty uncertain all around us. I think the first step in that journey is to examine the role that fear plays in our lives. What kind of role is fear playing in your life right now at this moment? How much of what you and I do or don't do is driven by fear? It's time to look at that. Fear can be a motivator, right? It can motivate us to do things, and not always in a good way. Ever been in an unhealthy relationship because you are afraid of being alone? Has the fear of aging ever pushed you to make a decision that was a little out of character? Ever wondered why there are so many middle-aged men driving red Corvettes? Or why so many women, as we age, turn to cosmetic surgery? Neither of those things are terrible. It's a matter of what drives you toward that. Are you going toward that because you are pushed by some fear that your life is flying past you? Are you motivated by fear? Does the fear of financial insecurity lead you to be less than generous? Are you so afraid, oh, there's a recession coming, I'm going to hoard everything in? Does the fear of that financial insecurity make you want to just hoard it all in and be less than the generous person God created you to be? Fear is not only a motivator, it's also an inhibitor. We get stuck, right? We get trapped by our fears, the job that we didn't pursue because we feared rejection. The concert we missed because we feared what might happen in a crowd. Sometimes fear keeps us from living the lives that God gave to us in full abundance. Fear can push or pull us away from that abundant life that God has in store for us here on this earth right now. Again, I ask you, how much of what you and I do or do not do is driven by fear? Is fear keeping us from being the people God created us to be? Remember that quote from President Roosevelt? He said, "The only thing to fear is fear itself." Now, he said that to a fearful nation in World War II as they tried to get a grip on all the fears that were going on. But is that true? Do we need to fear fear? I mean, actually, we're tying ourselves up in knots here. I don't think so. In fact, I've come to believe that when we understand what fear really is, fear in itself is not a bad thing. Fear is a gift from God. It is a God-given alert system that was designed to keep us from harm. I mean, when we are in imminent danger, fear is what triggers that high alert. Danger, danger. It's that high alert that goes off in our bodies. Our hearts start to race, our palms get sweaty, and our brains miraculously go into high alert. Our brains and our instincts go into high alert. They are warning us from danger, and they are actually showing us a way out of danger if we listen to our bodies in high alert. They will guide us to action. Fear is not a bad thing. We need fear. Sometimes we need fear. We just need to act on it. But while God gave us fear, let me be clear, God did not intend for us to lead fearful lives. Listen to that carefully. God did not intend for us to live fearful lives. So why are we so afraid all the time? Well, I think we've lost sight of what fear truly is and what it is intended to be. When I was growing up as a young girl, I had this real love-hate relationship with the word fear. And I grew up in a Baptist church where people are often talking about the fear of the Lord. I grew up with that Bible verse, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. What? What does that mean? I'm made in fear, I'm made out of fear, I'm made to be fearful? That doesn't make any sense to me. And the words fear the Lord is the beginning of knowledge or wisdom. There are tons of those in the Old Testament. And then you get to the New Testament, you get to John, and it says that perfect love has no fear. So, how do you weigh that? Does not compute. Until finally somebody showed me that the word in the Old Testament, yirah, the word for fear, actually can also mean respect and reverence. Now that makes a lot more sense to me. I'm respectfully made, respect God, have reverence for God. That makes a lot more sense to me. Since that day, I have been fascinated by that Hebrew word and the link between these two ideas of fear and respect. I think many of you know I started my career in television, and in 1980, I know I'm really dating myself here, it's a long time ago, but in 1980, I set out to Alaska to do a documentary on the oil crisis. And that documentary led me all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, but I based, while I was in Alaska, in Nome, Alaska. And at the time, I thought because I had heard of the town Nome, I had actually heard of it, that it was probably a city. Let me tell you, in 1980, Nome, Alaska was not a city. It was a lot more like a village. And the place where I stayed was more like a lodge, and I think I was probably the only woman in like a 100-mile radius. Talk about fear. And boots would be stacked up every night. But one day I found myself with a free day. It was a pretty day. It was April. It wasn't obsessively cold. It was like in the 30s. So I was putting on my boots. I had my down jacket on, and I'm out on the porch getting my boots on. I saw a trail up behind the lodge, and I was going to walk that trail and take a nice hike and really get out into the countryside. And about that time, this man came out of the door, and I promise you, this is like central casting Grizzly Adams. Remember that show, Grizzly Adams? This burly guy with a big beard comes out, and he stands on the porch. He said, "Well, where do you think you're going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to walk that trail back there. It looks like it's a pretty day. It looks like a nice day for a good walk. I'm going to go walk the trail." He said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He said, "At this time of year, the bears are starting to come out of hibernation." And he said, as they come out of hibernation, they're really hungry, and they are not in a very good mood. So I said, "So you're telling me that I should fear the bears?" And he said, No, lady. You're standing on the porch. I'm not asking for fear. Fear makes people do crazy things. And fear is how a lot of bears are killed unnecessarily. We're standing on the porch. I'm asking you to respect the bears. Respect that these are wild animals who've been in hibernation, and you don't know very much about them. Respect that they are in their own habitat and that you are an intruder in their habitat. I'm asking you to respect the bears. And then he looked over at me and gave me one of those half smiles, and he said, "But if you decide to walk that path anyway and you run into a bear, be afraid, be very afraid." See the difference between the two? Fear is for imminent danger. Fear is the God-given alert system when we are in danger. Respect is how we get control of fear. You don't run into a burning building not because you're afraid. You don't run into the burning building because you respect that fire can be harmful. You're not fearful because there's nothing to be afraid of if you're standing outside the building. You respect that this is something you can't control and it can be harmful. And you respect that the men who come from the fire department are better equipped and more knowledgeable, and that any rescue attempt is better done by those who know what they're doing. You respect that fact. There is a blessed union between these two words, fear and respect. I was thinking about it. I don't know how many of you have children learning to drive, teenagers learning to drive. If you do, we'll say a special prayer for you at this moment. That's talk about anxiety. That is a moment, but I have to tell you, we don't want to send our children, our teenagers, out fearful. Fear is that high alert. We don't want our kids out on the roads in high alert, but we do want them to be respectful of cars around them that they can't control. They cannot control the traffic that goes on around them. They need to drive with respect for the things that they can't control and the potential harm that is there in those things they can't control. That's respect. And I like respect because respect leads to caution. And caution is a good thing. Fear. The Bible not only tells us a lot about fearing God, the Bible also says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I read somewhere on the internet that it's said 365 times in the Bible. I will tell you right now, I spent a lot more time than I should have this week trying to prove that. Googling Bible verses that say fear, I do not be afraid. I couldn't. I got down the rabbit hole, pulled myself back up. I could count about 200. Doesn't matter. Just know that it's said a lot. It's said a lot in the Old Testament, and Jesus says it often in the New Testament. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. God is with you. God will hold your right hand. Jesus says, fear not. Don't be afraid. Jesus knew that then, as well as now, fear would be an issue. Fears that God-given alert system that we're in danger, and the reaction that occurs in the presence of something that's terrifying. Now, it could be terrifying mentally or physically, but hormones are released and our heart races, our pupils dilate, our skin gets flushed, our bodies sometimes tremble. There is that fear-driven fight or flight response. The key of this is that our bodies are preparing us to take some kind of action. Fear, the alert system, in order for that to shut off, we need to do something. We need to do something. Fear demands some kind of action, and I think we've lost sight of that. When we don't act on our fear in some way, and I'm not saying you have to stay and fight, I'm not even saying you have to run, but if you don't act on your fear in some way, it continues to fester inside. You stay on high alert. And know that that high alert system is not designed to be long-term. It is designed to be short-term. Our bodies simply are not equipped to be on high alert for long periods of time. Our hearts just aren't made for that. Our hearts are not made to be going at that rate. Our brains are not made for that. We will wear our bodies out. We are not built for that. So what happened? How did we get so overloaded? Well, somewhere along the line, human beings figured out that people are motivated by fear. You want somebody to vote the way you want them to vote? Yeah, show some scary picture. Show some picture that hits at their deepest fear. I want you to think about that. It's election season. Don't be manipulated. You want somebody to buy something? Security system? Yeah. Show that scene where the burglar is breaking in downstairs and the woman's upstairs with the baby. If you want to motivate people, show something that makes them afraid. We've allowed that to really intrude in our lives, and we get it from all sides. TV ads, social media, oh my goodness, on Facebook. You know, we can't take our eyes off it. There's that story, oh my goodness, it's gut-wrenching and it's awful and it's terrible and it makes us afraid and we just can't look away. We don't even bother to see if it's real or true or if it's some kind of manipulation, and often it is. But it triggers our fear response, and because often when these things are manipulating us, they're fears that we really cannot act on. So what happens is we go into high alert and it doesn't turn off. And that becomes anxiety, high anxiety. Anxiety in its simplest form, like fear, is not bad. It's a natural response to stressful situations. It's natural and normal to feel a little anxious if you're given a speech for the first time, to feel a little anxious if you're going to a new job or a new school, if you're going to see the doctor. Those are natural occurrences to be a little anxious. But anxiety will cross into the danger zone when it's in a prolonged state. The feeling of fear, that high alert in anticipation of a future event. You see, fear is about something that's happening right now, danger right now. Anxiety takes us into a fear of something that might happen in the future. My middle daughter is afraid to fly, has been for years. And so getting on a plane causes her great anxiety. She's been working on it for a long time because it's not really a fear of flying, it's more of a fear of being in a confined space. So knowing your fear and understanding your fear, but it doesn't work to be in that high anxiety, high alert state for long periods of time. And as we talked about earlier, if anxiety is something that you battle or someone in your family does, I hope you will stay after the service. Matthew Swartz, who is a counselor, is here. He's a therapist, and he has a wonderful talk on anxiety, how to deal with it, when to know that you might need to get some help. Please stay and be a part of that after the service today. But what can we do? In a world where we are bombarded with fear and plagued by anxiety, how do we move forward? What are we talking about here? How do we move forward with courage and hope? I can't help myself. I sleep with my phone by my bed. Years of being a mother, being a grandmother, actually from when my parents were ill, it does. My phone is right by my bed. In the pre-dawn hours this morning, I heard that all too familiar beep, beep text coming through. Now, I could have ignored it, but now I'm awake, so why? Let's just check it out. I can't resist. And sure enough, it was my friends from the New York Times with the daily headline. This morning's headline, South Carolina, Democratic primary election, coronavirus, and the Taliban. Seriously? On a day when we're talking about fear and anxiety? The election, this virus that's spreading, in the Taliban. But the truth is, there is not much that I can do, especially not at 5 o'clock in the morning from my bedroom, that will affect any of those. Being anxious about those is simply not helpful. Not to me and not to the world. Remember, fear is supposed to be short-term. Danger, high alert, action. Danger, high alert, action. I watch a video of the glaciers melting in Alaska, and my fear alarm goes off. I'm sure yours does too. I mean, it's sad to watch, but it's also fearful. We watch those glaciers melting, and our fear alarms go off, and the first action is to do some research. Is this real? And frankly, I believe it is. So what action can I take so I can get this high alert turned off? What action can I take? Okay, I can recycle, and I can do some things that will help the environment. But the truth is, there's not a whole lot that I can personally do that's going to make that big of a difference. I mean, that's the reality. It's a big world. And I believe we should all do our part. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we can't turn it off at that point knowing that it's over. There is a point where simply, people, we have to turn it over to God. We have to do our part, take our action, turn off the high alert, and trust in God. Trust in God. I think it's like that third F, or fight or flight or faith. Have faith in God. What does that mean? Well, I think most of you know this, but for those who don't, on December 31st of this year, I was a quarter-time pastor at this church. That's 8 hours a week. I was a quarter-time pastor here, a fourth of my time, my work time here, and Allegedly, 3/4 of my work time spent in the career that I've had for the past 40 years. In the space of 3 weeks to the day, 3 weeks, I leaped from quarter time to full time to leading this church in the interim while Jeff's away. That's a pretty big leap. Now, I was willing to do it. I was honored to do it. I still feel really privileged to be here doing this. But if I told you that I did that without some anxiety, I would not be truthful. If I told you that in those early days, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night going, what is this? I would not be truthful. It made me anxious. It brought out every fear that I might have about my call to ministry. And I have to tell you, in one sense, with the drama and the speed that everything happened around here, anxiety was pretty normal. I mean, I would wake up, I saw, and if you're reading the book, you will read that Adam Hamilton talks about his anxiety nightmare. I'm glad that he has them too, because believe me, in the last 2 months, I've had the anxiety nightmare. It's the one where you're sipping a cup of coffee with your family, and you look over, and it's 11:30, and you go, church has started. And you go running out the door. That's the anxiety. That's a typical anxiety nightmare. And I had plenty of those. But there came a point about 3 weeks ago when I realized that, frankly, there was just no time to be anxious. I mean, there's work to be done here. There was and is still work to be done here. And I can't do it if I'm not sleeping at night. I can't be here present for you like I should be if I'm not sleeping. I can't be here if I'm on high alert all the time that I will mess this up. So I had to do something. I had to take some kind of action that turns that high alert mode off. So one day I went upstairs to my office. I have an office up on the 3rd floor. I took out a piece of paper and I scribbled on that paper Psalm 56:3. It's a verse I learned as a child. What time I'm afraid, I will trust in God. Amen. Whenever I'm afraid, whenever I'm anxious, I will trust in God. I took that paper and I put it on my desk where I would see it every day, and read it every day, and go to God in prayer every day to remind myself that I serve a God who's never going to let me fall. Even when I can't see it, I serve a God who is going to be with me every step of the way. Every Sunday when I come up here and wonder, well, are these the right words? Jesus whispers, it's okay. Leave it to me. I got this. I got this. You don't have to do it alone. You don't do it alone. Every day I reminded myself that when I am afraid, I can trust in God. And that, my friends, is how I put one foot in front of the other for the past 4 weeks. When I tell you I'm glad that James is here, you have no idea. You have no idea. And that's the answer to a prayer. I trusted that God would answer that prayer to really send some help and some energy and some knowledge, and he did. I wasn't kidding when I said, Jesus, thank you, because you heard every prayer that I said in those offices, in my office. Fear, high alert, action. Don't forget that. We get messed up when we forget the action part. You have to do something in order to turn off the high alert mode. And we're going to take an action today. We're going to do something. We're going to take a step on the path to living unafraid. It's a small step, but I think it's an important step. Would you close your eyes right now? Would you close your eyes? I want you to visualize one thing that frightens you the most. Visualize that thing that frightens you or makes you anxious. Visualize that. Look at it. Look at it hard. Now visualize one thing that brings you joy and peace. Maybe it's a smile or a handshake, or maybe it's a friend, a loved one, a grandchild. Visualize what brings you joy and peace. Now visualize the cross. Visualize the cross. Yes, I know Easter's coming, but here's a clue. Easter actually came a long time ago, and the living Christ is right here. He's already here. Visualize the cross and feel the healing power of the resurrected Christ now in each and every one of you. Feel that. See that. Remember, Jesus said, "Give me your burden. Oh, you who are weary, give me your burden." Take that fear and give it to Jesus. And feel the burden of that fear lifted in peace. Open your eyes. I'm looking for my cross. You should each have a cross. Thank you, James. You should have a cross like this. I want you to take this cross and write on it. You can write in pencil or pen, it doesn't matter. I found actually pencils work pretty well. But I want you to write on this cross that thing that you fear the most, the thing that brings you anxiety. You can write a couple of things if you want to. I saw some at the earlier service that were like filled across. You can write as many things as you want to. Write on this cross the things that worry you or frighten you the most. And during communion, I'm going to ask you to bring these crosses down and put them in a basket that's going to be sitting right here. We're going to turn these fears over to God. We're going to trust in God and put these fears and these anxieties in the basket. But let me tell you something. It doesn't mean that the thing that frightens you is going to go away. If you are frightened of an illness, don't expect a miraculous cure when you put the cross in the basket. That's not what this is all about. That's not what Jesus promises. What you will know when you put your cross in the basket, that you can put your trust in God, that God's promise is to walk with you through whatever you face. You can trust that God will be with you and that whatever you're facing is not the end of the story. Whatever you're going through is not how this story ends. Jesus did not walk to the cross trusting that God was going to, whisk him away with no pain and suffering. He did trust that the cross was not the end of the story. He trusted that God would guide him back to each and every one of us. He trusted that the cross, that the suffering was not the end. Your suffering, your pain, your fear, whatever it is not the end of the story. So put it on here in recognition that you know that, and that you trust in God, and that you trust that God will be with you. Know the peace and the joy and the love of a God who says, remember when he said to Jacob, "Behold, I'm with you and I will keep you. I'm with you and I will keep you wherever you go." As you're writing on your crosses, we're going to come and prepare the table. We're preparing the table for communion today. What a good time to put those fears and anxieties in the basket. Come to the table unencumbered. Come to the table and know the joy of coming to share with all of your church family and with God at the table, the bread and the wine, the promise of God to always be with us, a God who loves us. So come. As we prepare the table, prepare your crosses. James, would you join me?